Good afternoon or evening from the News Radio 1120 and 93.7 FM KPNW studios. I am Flannel Bill. Yes, it's flannel season. And, of course, I do the wake-up call, 6 a.m. to 9 on KPNW, which, by the way, you can stream worldwide at kpnw.com if you're one of those people that actually goes on the interwebs. All right, tonight's news brought to you by Sean Sutherland, because Sean loves crazy news, and we've got plenty of it for you. Sean Sutherland, by the way, is a guy that when you have insurance questions, you ask questions of him. You say, Sean, why is my insurance not covering all of my medical bills? And he'll try to explain it to you. Maybe he can explain something in such a way that you're going to save yourself some money. That's really important because, well, how many people really like giving money to insurance companies? So when you have a question, ask insurance. Sean Sutherland, that's his gig. All right, here is your crazy news. So, a federal appeals court dealt President Trump a big win, issuing a ruling that overturns a lower court's restraining order, which now clears the way for troops, National Guard troops, to deploy to Portland. Although it remains unclear how quickly that is going to happen, Oregon Governor Kotak is roundly unhappy. She says that the National Guard will remain staged and cannot be deployed until there's a full review of the ruling. And she says the 2-1 decision by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, in her words, is based on false information.
That administration is being dishonest, and these actions to deploy troops are a gross, un-American abuse of power.
Kotak continues to blame federal law enforcement for unrest outside of Portland's ICE facility.
The federal agents on the ground are essentially instigating conflict with folks who are lawfully protesting.
The governor and the Portland police chief took issue with the judge's findings that Portland police were not enforcing laws at the ICE building. Now, in a statement, the police chief said his officers will continue to have a presence in the area and claims they'll be focused on criminal behavior. Kotak says Oregon's Attorney General is asking for an immediate review.
And I will continue to do everything in my power to defend the health, safety, and prosperity of every Oregonian. The fight is not over.
Oh, she's going to defend my health and safety. Kotak also says there is no rebellion in Oregon and no need for military action in Portland.
I have repeatedly called on the Trump administration to tell the public exactly what mission he expects National Guard members to do. But the Trump administration has been silent on the answer.
In the ruling, the appellate court affirmed that presidential determinations are not reviewable by federal courts. One of the judges that dissented, Judge Susan Graber, said and claimed, in her words, there is no legal or factual justification to support the federalization. Well, Oregon Democratic legislators are pushing for another special session that they claim is needed, all caps, to respond to President Trump's enforcement of immigration laws. Lawmakers met on Friday to discuss options for legislation to, in their words, thwart raids where illegal aliens are arrested and deported. It remains to be seen just exactly what tools Oregon lawmakers could add, considering the state has the oldest and most extreme sanctuary state restrictions anywhere in the nation. All right, we're going to focus on some local stories. And one of them in particular on my show, The Wake Up Call, we've been following this for several months. And there has been a crime gang that has been involved at this point in almost 24 burglaries of Asian homes in the Eugene area. And we know that this is also happening in other jurisdictions here in Oregon. And we also know that this is happening in a number of places out of state. Now, we didn't talk about this, but I guess it was about October 9th. 7 of these guys were arrested, and they were arrested in Eugene. And we'll get into that story, and they were put into the Lane County Jail. Now, here we are on the 21st of October, and it's being reported that 6 of those 7 men who were busted and accused of being a part of that theft ring targeting Asian households in Eugene, 6 of them have been released on bail. And it's also being reported by Lane County mugshots that all 6 that were released as they were walking out of the Lane County jail were arrested by ICE. Edwin Cadena Pineda is the only one of the suspects who's still behind bars. The 7 were arrested at a local Airbnb after they broke into an Asian family's home on Skyline Boulevard. Eugene police said that they were able to track the vehicle using flock technology cameras. It's not known if those men who were busted by ICE are going to be charged federally for crimes, as investigators say the crimes which are targeting Asian Americans are part of a nationwide ring, and that many of those who have been arrested are from Central and South America. And it's kind of an interesting situation. We had a conversation on our show a few days ago with somebody with law enforcement that told us that part of the reason that they're targeting Asian homes is because many of these people come from countries where they don't trust banks. And so instead of putting money or jewelry or other things into banks or safety deposit boxes, they keep them in safes in their home. And there have been cases here in the Eugene area and apparently other jurisdictions where if they couldn't get into the safe, even if it was a large one, they literally walk out of the house with it. They're using Wi-Fi jammers. They have several different ways that they're subverting outdoor cameras. They've been going so far as to cut off power to the house to disable cameras, and a variety of other ways and methods that they're operating. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. Now, this is another story from the Eugene area, and it has to do with abandoned homes. Fire crews responded here in the Eugene area to yet another fire in an abandoned home that have happened in the last 5 days. This time it was in Eugene's University District area. According to Eugene Springfield Fire, the cause is undetermined, but they say the evidence there, again, is homeless squatters that break in to these abandoned homes that are sitting there, homes that have been on the market, and they essentially squat there. According to the Eugene Springfield Fire Department, that, again, this is akin to previous fires that have happened in the area over the last couple of years, and now in the last 5 days, 2 of them. ESF said firefighters were dispatched at about 2:30 a.m. last Friday to a house fire near East 17th Avenue and Moss Street. It was another abandoned home. And when they arrived, the home was well involved in fire. The crews initiated trying to do an interior attack, but they were stopped because of mounds of garbage, human excrement, and used needles. And they were also trying to search for possible victims in the house. So this was the same situation as the event that occurred on Monday with the fire. Now we have a group of residents that are up in arms about this because there are a number of these abandoned homes in the Eugene area, and they want the city to do something about it and be proactive. They have complained about both of these homes numerous times in the past with law enforcement, with their city councilors, and others involved in the city, and it has come to nothing, and now they are fed up. They say the fires not only create dangerous conditions for responding fire crews, but they threaten nearby properties. And these residents are now mobilizing. They want the city of Eugene to find a solution to prevent further incidents and ensure neighborhood safety. And it's not as if the homeless don't have shelters that are already provided by the public that they can go to. They choose not to. All right, another story that we've been following over the last couple of days, and it comes from the Eugene area. It has to do with a Eugene 4J school district psychologist. and she was arrested in connection with an online street drug selling enterprise. Okay, so what we now know is that 3 women, including the psychologist from the 4J school district, are facing some pretty serious charges related to this alleged online drug operation. Federal prosecutors have indicted 4J's Jennifer Blake, along with 2 others not connected to the school at all, Amanda Heffelfinger and Jesse Watson, because they were allegedly running an internet-based business selling illegal drugs like meth, Molly, ketamine, and LSD in change for cryptocurrency. Oh, it's meth for less. Anyway, according to a Columbus, Ohio news station, WSYX, a Columbus-based cyber narcotics task force discovered the trio of women's website, which was called Rocky Mountain Connections. Watson's accused of managing customer service, money laundering, and just general oversight of the operation. Meanwhile, the psychologist Blake and Heffelfinger are alleged to have handled drug order processing and then made sure that the drugs were shipped from Oregon through the U.S. Postal Service. Blake, by the way, the psychologist, has an online bio that indicates she worked at Chavez Elementary School, although according to the 4J school district and their spokesperson, Kelly McIver, she is not currently working in any schools, but says, yeah, she is an employee of the school district. And the district staffers became aware of the situation through an Ohio news report. And Blake and Heffelfinger are currently being held in a Polk County jail. Polk County is to the north of here, and likely they are in the county jail in a town called Dallas, Oregon. All right, so David Douglas High School in Portland is the state's largest high school. It has over 2,700 students, and it has a new student club that is drawing the support and the ire of the student body, parents, and also community members. So a teenager at the school started a club affiliated with the movement started by the late Charlie Kirk, who was assassinated on, of course, a Utah campus a few weeks ago. The club is part of a national network of high school clubs affiliated with Kirk's organization, Turning Point USA, and the club was approved by administrators at David Douglas. So they had their first meeting on October 8th, but dozens more students showed up than expected to that first meeting, and it prompted safety concerns from its founder, that according to school leadership. That's because other established clubs like the Black Student Union and the Latino Student Union showed up to protest and question the need for the club. All right, so that got off to a rocky start. Then prior to the second meeting, the club and the controversy hit social media with conservatives urging an in-person show of support for the club's teen founder. And that happened. Footage of the second meeting showed about 40 people came to the school to the after-school rally and flag waving near school property, not on it, near it. Their presence drew dozens of students to counter-protest. And apparently, according to witnesses, the counter-protests were somewhat taunting and questioned the flag wavers' presence and purpose. Now, a student journalist from the David Douglas High School newspaper who was on site told the Oregonian that there were actually some serious and sincere conversations between students and the protesters who found common ground around free speech protections. But he also said many of the exchanges eventually devolved into screaming matches. Now, district policy specifies that students can verbally express their personal opinions, but those opinions cannot be allowed to interfere with the rights of others to express themselves. And neither side can interfere with the operation of the school or classrooms. All right, so with ballots being sent out to voters across Oregon, because Oregon is a vote by mail state, and being sent out for the November election, one representative from Grants Pass, Dwayne Yunker, announced that he had sent a formal information request to Oregon's election director, Dina Dawson. He wants detailed data and procedures related to the state's voter registration system. So the request comes on the heels of Oregon's failure to respond to the Trump administration's request for federally required voter registration roll information and maintenance records. Representative Yunker says Oregon's reported increase in total voter registrations over the last year defies logic, considering Oregon has had a significant population loss in recent years. In other words, he's saying we've got more registered voters than we actually have citizens old enough to vote. He said, given the record numbers of Oregonians moving out of the state in the last few years, I don't understand how this is possible. He went on to say there is simply no way that move-ins and newly eligibles exceed move-outs and deaths. Now, the letter wants explanations how the state actually monitors non-citizen registrations, which we learned last year they really don't, removes ineligible voters, and accounts for changes in voter registration totals. He said, when ballots are sent out in the mail, confidence in the system has to be rock solid. He said, this is about transparency and protecting every lawful vote. And our final story is so screwed up, and it goes back to, once again, Oregon's war on law-abiding citizens and gets soft on crime. So the Oregon Department of Corrections very quietly began re-examining the sentences of almost everyone in the state's prison system. And it was after a fairly mundane court ruling over the summer. And in doing what they're doing, they have been shaving off a prisoner's time, and in some cases, releasing dozens of prisoners outright without even alerting prosecutors. Now, this massive review has led to the earlier release dates for, at this point, because they haven't got the job done yet, 350 prisoners, including 40 who were just immediately released. And that's according to corrections. Now, the new release dates apply to convictions including murder, rape, sodomy, child abuse, assault. At least 67 prisoners saw their sentence cut by a year or more. In one case, the data shows the agency trimmed off a dozen years from a violent defendant's sentence. And it gets worse. So prosecutors this week, after finding out about all of this by surprise, started questioning the state's legal analysis of a fairly mundane Oregon Supreme Court ruling dealing with the calculus of prison sentences and how the accused are sentenced. And they now, the DAs, are saying that the Oregon Department of Corrections is totally mismanaging its review of the court ruling. So here's the ruling. The Supreme Court of Oregon ruled in an appeal in an argument by criminal defendant Abraham Torres Lopez. And he argued that the sentence computation unit of the Corrections Department should have credited him roughly 4 months for the time he spent in 2 different county jails on various criminal charges when it calculated his ultimate prison sentence on a Marion County conviction. What the court ruled was that a trial court may give credit for concurrent jail time on separate allegations in another county. And it found that defendants may get credit for time they spent in jail for violating the terms of their probation. Now, the DAs say that they were completely blindsided. And not only were they blindsided, so were crime victims who are supposed to be contacted when they're perps, like rapists and murderers of family members are released from prison. Does this all sound familiar? The Oregon District Attorneys Association urged Governor Kotak to order an immediate pause to the implementation of the new sentencing formulas until there's clarity and consensus on how it should be applied. Broadly, prosecutors say the ruling should affect two groups: prisoners serving consecutive sentences for multiple convictions and those facing prosecution in multiple counties. Now, in one of the letters that were sent to Corrections Director Michael Reese came from Jackson County DA Patrick Green. He called the agency's resentencing calculations, quote, unjust and absurd. Green said the state's interpretation of the ruling, quote, defies common sense, further saying applying credit multiple times across consecutive sentences effectively nullifies the court's intent to impose distinct and meaningful punishment for separate crimes, rendering the imposition of consecutive sentences in these cases as meaningless. All right, so all of that sounds really complicated. So let me break it down for you in a real-world case from this particular DA's, Patrick Green from Jackson County. This is a case that had occurred in his county where a man was sentenced to jail. All right, so this particular man, the defendant, Alfredo Martinez, is a 35-year-old. And he was convicted in an impaired driving crash that seriously injured 4 people, 3 of them children. Now, the court sentenced Martinez to 4 consecutive 2-year sentences. So that would be a total of 8 years. Now, Martinez served 738 days in jail prior to the time of his sentencing. So about 2 years. Well, the Corrections Department recalculated his sentence, giving him 738 days of credit toward each one of his 2-year sentences. So instead of 738 days that he spent awaiting trial, going through the trial process before he was sentenced, he was given 2,952 days of credit for that entire 8-year sentence. Yeah, you can pretty much figure what happened. Oh, you get to go free. And by the way, when was he sentenced? Yeah, just late last year. So there's your crazy Oregon news. It's the way we do things here. Rick, it is time for you to get real. And by the way, big shout out and thank you to Sean Sutherland of Ask Insurance. He brings this stuff to you every week. Thanks, Sean. We now know who to blame.